各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jimmy 马健，我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们一起讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim,
Hello, Jimmy.
You know, I just got back from the East Coast from New York, and I was telling you how fortunate we are to live in Texas, in this great state, and to live in Houston.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're leaving for Sacramento, West Coast, this week. I was kind of trying to warn you. From what I hear on the West Coast, I was in LA 6 months ago. To me, Sacramento is close enough to San Fran. My wife and kids are supposed to go there next month. And all my friends are telling me how bad it is, that crime is uncontrollable. So I hope you stay safe out of Sacramento.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting growing up in the Central Valley of California, the Sacramento River Delta. What a lot of people don't realize, most people from outside of California think of California with the sunny beaches and the free spirits and the ecological green, all of the beautiful people that live up and down the coast. And that is all true. That's what's created the Hollywood image, the Silicon Valley image, everything else, the Beach Boys. But what a lot of people don't realize is there's another California of exactly the same size, which is on the inland, up and down the valley, all the way down through San Diego, and all the way up north to the Oregon border, which is agricultural based. California has more agriculture than the rest of the United States combined. Most people don't realize it. And it has social and political values that are just like the heartland of America. I mean, and there's all kinds of historical reasons for it, but it's two radically different cultures. Sacramento is kind of a historical quirk. It was created as the capital during the gold rush in 1850. The gold rush was 1849, and it stuck, and San Francisco grew up around it, and 50 years later, LA grew up around it. And then from then on, the coast took over with the big image. But I and my family are very comfortable being from an agricultural background in the heart of the state.
We talked about it before. How fortunate you are to grow up. It was rough. It was a lot of hard work, but it's a beautiful place to grow up, and it's a very simple way of life. You're absolutely right. The inland areas of California, which a lot of us, our audience, don't know, is there are a lot of very conservative, traditional family hubs with ranches, farmland. I know the produce from California, at least when I was in Orange County, was some of the best in the nation, from tomatoes to strawberries to avocados, to high value fruits and produce. And it was, when it's produced in California, it's good stuff.
Yeah, our farm was about a 30-minute drive to UC Davis, which is the forerunner of all agricultural research in the country. UC Davis created the Napa Valley with determining the kinds of wines that fit both, the grapes that fit both the soil and the weather. History. When I was a child, my father and his grandfather on our farm grew tomatoes and grew asparagus. Stockton, the closest town to our farm, is the asparagus capital of the world.
Nobody knows that.
Nobody knows that, but it's absolutely true. And I can go on about the artichoke and other capitals. But at any rate, here's my point. UC Davis, when labor laws changed, we used to have a guest worker program called the Bracero program. Bracero means arm in Spanish. I grew up speaking Spanish with the people who work with my father on a farm. But what a lot of people don't realize is that labor laws changed with the Kennedy administration in 1961, 62. And the Bracero program of guest workers all changed, which meant you could no longer have what they call hand crops, people harvesting tomato vines and cutting asparagus live. And so what was California agriculture to do? UC Davis invented a whole new strain of tomatoes. A lot of people don't realize that over 90% of the tomatoes that are grown go into things like ketchup and tomato paste, et cetera. We all think of tomatoes being sliced, and that's true. But at any rate, they developed a new form of tomato that had a thick enough skin that it could be harvested with a machine, and they developed the machine to harvest them all simultaneously. And within 5 years, agriculture throughout the Central Valley totally changed along that line. And I could go on with other stories. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal what that part of the country has actually accomplished. And
it's amazing. I wish I could.
Yeah.
I will take my children to visit because, you know, when I've driven down Pacific Coast 101, I've lived in Orange County for many summers. You know, every summer I'll go visit friends or family. I stayed a summer at Huntington Beach. I frequent Northern California, San Francisco area. It's just means a lot to me. It just, but go even inland. I have driven through Bakersfield and Stockton. It's very similar to Texas, actually. Rolling lands.
Absolutely, or flat lands, et cetera. Let me mention something else. The where my father's farm was in the River Delta is on what's called reclaimed land. The Sacramento River flows down from the north. San Joaquin flows north from the south, and they meet in the river delta. It's very much like the Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana. But what happened was they figured out that in the 1850s or 60s, they figured out that the land under the water was among the most fertile in the world. So they turned land that was under about 15 feet of water. They built levees around a whole series of islands, pumped out the water and reclaimed. It's very much like Holland, where our house on our farm was 15 feet below sea level. Okay, a lot of people don't realize that. But now I want to say something to our Chinese audience. California and all the United States owes an incredible debt to the Chinese immigrants of the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, because, and it's another part of our history which many of us are not very proud of. Basically, the indentured servants from China, huge numbers of Chinese people, came and actually built by hand those levees. They created sacks of soil that actually built the levees, hundreds of miles of them, literally by hand. And I went to grammar school, and then high school with descendants of those Chinese populations that had been Americans for
generations.
Yes, from China. And later the Philippines, a lot of Japanese people, a lot of Indian people, no surprise. And then European kids from Portugal, from Italy, from Poland, a lot from Ireland, no surprise, Irish farmers, etc., all came. We were, that part of California was the original melting pot.
That's early on too, before media, before social media, where you grew up experiencing. It's very touching that you were able to tell our audience about this, because even in the 60s, you knew about it. Because those people, the residential servants from China, they're called coolies. Oh, yeah. They built the dams, but they also hand built the railroads during the gold rush. And the derogatory term to describe Chinese immigrants, the most racist thing you can say is the sound that you make when you're hitting those railroad tracks. It's still very offensive to us, and we don't know why until now we talk about it. So we should all know the history of it and know that we should avoid these. The history happened, but you know what's great about California? They recognize it as in their school books and their memorials about it. Yes, and you know about it. So obviously we know that it's not being swept under the rug. So it's great history. But California, like you said, that's why it's amazing, right?
Right. And California had that. And one of the disappointing things about our current social discussions is a lot of the focus about racial inequities and injustice and discussions about reparations and equal rights and all that is focused on the African-American population, which is all deserved. But there are two other huge groups that suffer just as much. One, the Asian populations, particularly Chinese, like we've just been talking about. And the other is Native Americans. All through the West, where I've developed, et cetera, there are Indian reservations. And I've had great experience with them in parts of California, Arizona, big time, Montana, big time. And the US, the system grossly has mistreated the two large groups as well. So we've been an equal opportunity offender all along the way. And I'm just glad that I grew up in an environment where there was a little bit of everybody, a little bit of everything. And that was what was natural. Nobody thought anything about where you were from or what your last name was, what your dad did for a living. All that mattered is you were part of our class. And that's how we grew up.
Well,
everybody learned English real fast. But they all paid tribute to their own culture. And the beauty of it is when I was a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, eating the kind of foods that my classmates' parents prepared. I mean, it was wonderful. The world came to us.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up because it's amazing because this is why people love California. How do I say this? You've always been familiar with Asian culture. Well, you're a world traveler. You know a lot about a lot of countries, and you know you're pretty close to a lot of Chinese tradition. You understand it and respect it, and you enjoy it. We know this because I see you in all the events. But growing up, even me growing up, I always remember, and for a lot of our immigrant children, we always found embarrassed to bring our food to school because there will always be kids that will make fun of it, say, "Oh, it's true," because immigrant foods are more fragrant, more flavorful, and more exotic, right? Because we don't know what it was back then. You grew up eating it, so for you, it was normal. In Texas, if I bring something that is not a hamburger or a hot dog, people will think you're eating dog meat or rat, or the insults. But now it's not like that anymore. Now it's mainstream. I know my kids here in Fort Bend County, they have butter chicken, Indian food on the menu, elementary menu. There's Chinese food on the menu. There's all kinds of different cultures where they put it on the school menu where you can experience. And the exotic foods that people think is weird are the ones that people want to try, that want to share, Right. So you're talking about a generation ago, and it was already, how do I say this? Progressive, dare I say that? It was already very inclusive.
Yeah, it was naturally inclusive.
Without being forced upon.
Without being forced. It happened naturally. One of the things that Martin Luther King was famous for saying many years later was, you have to teach children to hate. A child isn't naturally oriented to hating or to mistreat others. He has to learn that. He or she has to learn that. And it's really a shame that parts of our culture have gone to that because where I grew up, it wasn't that way at all. And
well, you're very fortunate, first of all, to grow up in paradise, essentially. If I raise my kids, I wouldn't want to raise them in one of those cities that have very high crime rates where their district attorney is being recalled because they let everyone out. Did you know that in San Francisco, they successfully recalled a few school board members because they're openly discriminatory toward a certain subset of citizens, which is the Asian Americans. They purposely targeted and they were recalled because in San Francisco, Asian votes are actually the majority. Did you know that?
Well, that it's always been very, very influential. But ironically, San Francisco has world-renowned Chinatown. I mean, people all over the world know about Chinatown in San Francisco. Yeah. And finally, about 20 years ago, Ed Lee was the first Chinese American mayor of San Francisco. The Chinatown of San Francisco is probably not as big as the one in New York, just north of Wall Street, but it's every bit as recognized. And it's
actually more important. I give you a reason why. San
Okay.
Francisco Chinatown was the basis during the Japanese occupation. Well, before that, when the dynasty was, when the revolution ended, the Qing dynasty, a lot of the support came from the city of San Francisco. There were the grandfather for both Republic of China, Taiwan, and the People's Republic recognizes Dr. Sun Yat-sen as the like the George Washington of the United States. Sun Zhongshan is the founding father for both entities, right? Funnily, they both recognize him. He's the one, his support mainly came from the West Coast, from the United States. The idea of republic, of democracy, right? He brought that Sanmingzhuyi to China. And later on, both the Communist Party and the KMT both used that principle. But they both recognized him. But San Francisco was the base. A lot of the history, Chinese history, no matter what part of the world you were in, is tied into San Francisco's Chinatown. Some of the oldest Chinese American organizations are still based there at the headquarters. So every time I go there, there's a lot of history, a lot of pride. In the same way for Japanese Americans, during World War II, there was internment. They were literally locked up. And then there's official apologies. But was there any reparations? Is there any? No, there isn't. Now, it needs to be part of history so we don't repeat it, right?
Right.
But it's a shame to see that the city of San Francisco has become very lawless. I have a lot of Asian American friends from there. They're very disenfranchised with the system, with the government. And this is what our show is supposed to talk about, this divide. You've always said, if swung too far to the left or right, it is bad for our country. We can come back to the middle. And I hope that with the recall here in San Francisco and with the successful recall of the school district members, I hope that we will start doing our duties as elected officials, which is to serve the entire population, not just a special small subgroup that are extreme or very, the small group that is the most vocal. It doesn't serve the best interest of the entire population. It is very sad to even bring that up because it is bad out there, Jim. When you went last year, we talked about it briefly. I mean, you don't go to jail for anything under $900. They're open looting. They're breaking into cars among the tourist areas daily on the same street. The Walgreens and CVS announced they're getting out of that market. When a national chain decides that's not worth their time to have security, they're getting out the market completely. It's a disservice to the citizens of the area. It actually hurts everyone.
It absolutely does. I'm not sure where this thing's going to end, and we could be looking at the destruction, the absolute destruction of one of the most beautiful, most vibrant places on earth, San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco has such a rich history. It is so beautiful in so many ways. And it's being destroyed from within. It's just baffling to me that the other leadership, the internal leadership doesn't turn it around. But it may have to go through that kind of catharsis and then get rebuilt. I really don't know.
Is there anything left to rebuild after what's been going on? I mean, after being destroyed, after what's being built, how do you rebuild that? What is there left after? You know what I mean?
Well,
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it all has to come with social change. There was a fascinating comparison I saw about 5 years ago. It showed the city of Nagasaki, Japan, in 1945 and 2015. And it showed the city of Detroit in 1945 and 2015. And of course, Nagasaki, after the bomb, was basically leveled. I mean, there was almost nothing there. And Detroit was on top of the world. The U.S. had just won the war with industrial might. Detroit was the center of American industry. And then only 60 years later, the roles were totally reversed. Detroit had collapsed from within, the city of Detroit. The auto industry was having very, very difficult times. But meanwhile, Nagasaki had grown very, very prosperous with the lift of all of the Japanese economy. It's American. I mean, it is amazing what the human spirit can accomplish when it is free to do so. And I mentioned earlier about some of the difficulties that the American establishment has had here domestically, but I think two of the things that the United States has done wonderfully well around the world is the rebuilding of Japan and the rebuilding of Germany after World War II. I mean, it's been an incredible human as well as an economic achievement. Anyway, we could go on.
I agree with you. No, I was trying to pull up this data to show that this great explosion of immigration and an explosion of a mix of cultures is so beneficial for this country. Instead of saying a melting pot, back in the days we say melting pot. Now we don't want to melt. We want immigrants to come, assimilate, but still maintain their identity and culture, and we can all learn and share and enjoy it. And yeah.
I think there's a benefit to doing both. I've always said diversity is something to be celebrated, not something to be ashamed of. We can lift each other up.
We might all look different, but we're all immigrants in different way. You're an immigrant. Your grandmother came here,
Right. And look at some of the most successful Americans. Look at Tiger Woods. Look at somebody like Alicia Keys. If they were in a dog pound, they'd be considered a mutt because they are full
mixed race. Everywhere, from everywhere.
Men.
I think our next generation. Yeah, I think from our next generation, there shouldn't be race or identity will not be based on your skin color because everyone will be mixed in. I hope so.
Well, I think it's only a matter of time before that all happens naturally as people intermingle and as travel and communication continue to get easier and better and better. I think that will all happen naturally. But I just don't understand this political ideology that's become popular in the last several years of slicing and dicing people into smaller and smaller groups, pitting them against each other. I just simply don't get it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And where is supposed to all lead? I don't know who benefits from it.
It's so odd you bring this up because this is like taboo, for some minority groups, they feel like it's necessary. Oh, they want to be recognized. But what it actually does is actually, like you said, it actually hurts you because it dilutes and you pit against it. It is so interesting to bring it up because please don't be offended. Usually when you say that, you will be offended. Not offended. I meant, how should I say this? Understand where I'm coming from. Coming from someone like you, for you to call this out is really kind of, it should be a wake-up call, because for a lot of these sub-Asian or Latin or African-American groups, you feel like you should be distinguished, separated out. But for you to recognize that it actually hurts you as a group, it actually pits against each other, just like the model minority myth, which is used to put down other races. It's not true. These are all, in a way, marketing and propaganda in a way to divide and conquer. So I'm glad you call it out like it is. Most people won't say that.
Yeah, but I mean, what do we got to lose? I mean, let's be honest with each other and celebrate diversity.
Amongst our audience, either they're everyone's from China, but either they're immigrants from China or their parents went to Taiwan first or Hong Kong, maybe 1 or 2 generations extra. That's all. Okay, but yet there's certain groups, special interest groups that want to divide whether you're a Taiwanese American or not. It's kind of sad because United Nations doesn't recognize Taiwan. There is no country of Taiwan.
No.
Everyone from Taiwan, unless you're Aboriginal, which is like the native Indian, you're all immigrants. The only difference is you came 50 years early or 50 years late. For you to distinguish it doesn't make sense to me. I understand if you want, being Korean, Japanese is very different. But in Taiwan, you speak the exact same language, you eat the same food, you worship the same God. You share the same fest, everything is the same, except it's separated by a different ruling party. It does not make sense to me at all. I've always been against it. It is a new way to, but some people believe in it, and it's very controversial in the community right now, Jim. It's very unique that you bring it up. I think we could spend many, many episodes just delving into this, but alas, we're running out of time. Once again, I want to say a very short prayer. Just close our eyes and pray very quickly for the victims in Tulsa. We pray, Lord, to ease their suffering, to hope that we end this violence and bloodshed. Amen.
Amen.
I just want to do a very quick prayer. I'm sorry, Jim.
No, that's fine. That's the topic. That's the topic of the day. It takes tragedy to push COVID off the headlines. So.
Yeah, but these mass shootings are ridiculous. I mean, hospitals, schools, churches, where else, right? I mean, we talked about it before. We both have different viewpoint on it. Actually, I get it. I understand. I'm not gonna. There's a lot of good people on both sides of this. We have to have a solution soon, and there will be. I have faith in the system. There has to be. I'm just happy for you that your kids are out of. Well, you do have grandchildren too, so we're in the same boat. We're in the same boat.
They're coming up, but what better place for them to live in than Texas? So it's.
I just hope we have some, like you proposed. We need to have better background checks and we'll assault rifle ban. That's all. I don't want to worry about my kids going to school. Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
So, have a safe trip, sir. And my condolences to your family. We should talk about it. It's crazy, right? 2 years. We didn't bring it up yet, but this COVID is literally historic. That it changed a lot of family history, right? And for us personal, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the things that I hope comes out of this about the COVID experience is the importance of health, physical health, mental health, faithful health,
mind, body, spirit. Yes, sir.
Mind, body, spirit. How many people became sick and fatally so for so many? Not just because of COVID, but because of comorbidities and the importance of being healthy or the reverse. And so I would hope that we take a very, very serious look at our social behavior that leads to health.
Absolutely. And we need to take a more look, and we need to mend. We need to heal. So, Jim, have a safe travel, have a safe trip, and we hope to see you next week.
Talk to you next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Here, Jim. Thank you. Bye-bye.